Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today we're going to be breaking down the Friday slate for the NBA for January 25th, 2019. This one's going to be out there a little bit later, maybe like an hour later. Still trying to get situated, try and get rooms booked here at my university somewhere to make these videos come out sooner in the day so you guys can capitalize on them. But I'm sure most people, as I've seen in the comments, are getting some use out of them. So also let me know if you are. If this is your first time here, my name is Sal. Welcome to my channel. Do daily fantasy sports, just slate breakdowns and just different ways. Try to be unique about it, not just put up a 5 to 10 minute video about my picks for the day. That's great and all, but I don't think that that's actually teaching anybody anything. And most of the time, those are just for views. They're not really getting anybody anything. So I want to provide more value for you guys. I was doing fantasy football stuff, and now that season's pretty much over, we're going to jump into NBA, also be around for MLB, looking into golf a little bit. But for you guys watching this, you're probably interested in the NBA. If I just want to ask one thing of you guys, if at any point in this video you think that the material is helping you, please do subscribe and please do like the video. Comment below and let me know that you subscribed and why you subscribed. What was it about the video that kind of caught your attention, or maybe it helped you, something that just stood out. So throughout the video, at any point, that's all I ask. I would like to try and make this hobby and side passion or side hustle of mine just into a career, and your guys' support and just building this channel up is going to be able to do that and help me do that. So with that being said, let's jump into the slate. So we got a full 10-game slate tonight. That's what the big tournaments are. And something I'll say right before we get into it, just a little tidbit. I've been getting people in our Facebook group, which if you're not in there, jump into the Facebook group down below, talking about how to win tournaments and stuff like that. I'll just address it right here. Winning tournaments is hard. Placing in tournaments alone is hard, right? It's the top 18% on most sites if there's rake. Maybe it's the top 30% if there's no rake, like Yahoo's been doing. And what rake means is just the company's percentage, the website's percentage that they take out of it. So it's hard to win, right? You're only going to win 18% of the time, and you're going up against guys. And most of these big tournaments, like this one we're seeing right here, 400K Slam, where there's 100K for first, most of these guys are entering mass lineups. They're professionals, so your chances of win are even slimmer if you're not somebody putting that much time or research into it. Obviously, you guys watching this are putting a little more time in than just a random person. But it's going to be hard, and there's a good chance you never win a big tournament like this. Yes, if you set yourself up smart and consistently and you put the time in, you can place and you're going to set yourself up to win, but it's still hard to do. So if you're going to be playing tournaments, and you shouldn't have all your money in tournaments, that's just not a good idea. Something that you should be doing is looking at lower stakes. Choose game selection. So don't go into these mass enter tournaments where your one lineup has to beat out professionals 150 lineups. That's just going to be a very bad situation for you. Yes, you could throw a couple in if you're just playing for entertainment, but if you actually want to win, look for single entry where everybody only gets to put one lineup in. 3 max, everybody only gets to put a max of 3 in. So you're kind of on the same playing field. Yahoo Fantasy Sports, they're a pretty good website. You can sign up below and get entered into some free promotional contests. They're pretty good because you can only put 10 max entries into all of your fields. So even the professionals are on somewhat of a similar level as everybody else. Another big tip for tournaments is look at the lower stakes. I've been playing the 25 cents as long as I can stakes the past week or so, because I'm trying to prove a point here that if you play those 25-cent stakes and you max them out or whatever it might be, and you put $20 into those and you're getting whatever it is, 80 lineups in those, and first place is $100 or first place is even $20, who cares, because you're putting in 25 cents if you're only putting one lineup in. But if first place is $100 and you win, that's a pretty good investment, even if you're putting 20 into it. You 5x your money. And the biggest thing, Julius Randle last night, he was ruled out 45 minutes before game time. It wasn't even like it was a last-second decision. He was still 10% owned in that tournament, right? You had guys like Seth Curry, who earlier in the day, when Damian Lillard was a little questionable, was getting some heat. He was still like 3% owned. You're just getting you're getting to jump those guys who are going to take zeros for guys who aren't playing, who are going to take single-digit points for backups who never see the role and they thought they were going to play. These are just people who don't care because they're only putting in a quarter instead of people like in this tournament putting in $10. So that's game selection. Make sure you're looking into it. Otherwise, you're just going to be burning a lot of your money in these bigger tournaments. Yes, you could take shots at these tournaments, but do it with your winnings from those smaller tournaments. Do it primarily with your winnings from cash if you want to do that. And cash games are just head-to-heads, double-ups, just where you have kind of like a 50-50 shot at winning. And if you're actually somebody watching this and caring, you give yourself a little more edge because you're looking at the research, the information more. Whereas in low-stakes cash, people are going to leave in a guy like Julius Randle, and they're just going to automatically take a zero and probably lose, because you can't do that in NBA. Just because the points, the variant in points is just so big. You can't take a zero like you can in the NFL. So that's just what I wanted to say about that. It's tough to win tournaments. So yeah, let's just get into the next part, which is breaking down this slate, right? So we can slide over to the spreadsheet. Injuries, there's a lot of them. I went through and looked at this last night, and then I highlighted it over this morning just to see about the injuries from last night. as well. Again, got a late start. There was some crazy stuff happening here at State College, active shooter, whatever it was. So got a late start on all this stuff. Everything's fine though. As of right now, everybody I know is safe, so we're good to go. Looking into this, though, we're just going to look at some of the key injuries. I highlighted some of them. Drummond, he seems like he's going to play, questionable. What does that do? It takes the Zaza value play that's been working pretty well off the table. It takes Griffin. A lot of his usage will go down a little bit. Still should see a lot of usage, but should take it down. Some other guys in here, I mean, you guys can read through this. You guys can just look at it. Make sure the mic's on. Yeah, I get paranoid about that. But Ayton, another guy who's just been dealing with some injuries, he's questionable with an ankle. If he doesn't play, if Rashawn Holmes doesn't play, then Bender, again, is a smash value at 4,600. Spencer Dinwiddie, so this is interesting. He's going to be out potentially for 2 or 3 weeks was the initial report. Now people are saying the Nets aren't confirming that, but it seems like he's probably going to be out at least today as far as we know with the thumb. I have him out here. I think he's ruled out. If not, he's very questionable, probably won't play. So what does that do? It makes a couple of guys interesting to me. Impacted players, you're going to have to see who starts. But a guy like Harris, who also we'll get into as a good matchup, he should see at least a couple more shot attempts in the game, maybe a little more usage. Russell, whose price continues to skyrocket because he continues to perform well, he's going to see even more usage because a guy like Dinwiddie, who was pretty much that 1-2 punch once LeVert went down with him and Russell, is now out of the lineup. Another big injury is Larry Nance says that he expects to play today and come back. That's good because he's going to have a good situation. Tristan Thompson is still ruled out, so he should be in perfect position to get a double-double in his matchup. It's going to impact Cedi Osman's playing time, especially down in the forward position. Shouldn't impact Ante Zizic too much, but it could definitely impact him. I'd rather see Larry Nance get the start at center, not sure if we're gonna do that. And the reason is when you're starting at center, you have just higher percentage shots. You're shooting from 2 or 3 feet away. You're having more chances at offensive rebounds, just more points. So I'd rather if he plays there at his price, I think of 5,800, he's just a smash. Teague is questionable now, and I'll also talk about Rose, who got injured last night. Both are questionable. So if one of them plays and the other doesn't, that's an advantage to that player, obviously. If they both don't play, then there's some interesting plays. Especially there was a tweet that got sent out last night. I can't remember the man's name who actually said it. I should have credited him, but I'll look into it. And basically, when Rose and Teague are off the floor, it's just been Towns' best usage of the entire year. There's just an absolute usage spike. He's averaging like 27 points a game, 15 rebounds, like 6 assists, whatever it is. He's just going absolutely off. So that's something to definitely keep in mind as Towns is now $10,000. But if these guys are out and you know you're going to get some guaranteed usage and just points have to go through Towns, it's a place to look at. Some other things to look. Questionable is Moutier. He sustained something in practice, a little shoulder injury. So that's definitely something to watch out there for sure. Jabari Parker should be returning today, and with Wendell Carter now just completely shut down, you might see a little more Jabari usage. Not sure if we'll see that. It's going to impact Hutchinson a little bit. It'll impact Bobby Portis a little bit, but Portis should still be starting at the center, so not too much. I have this italicized here for Luke Cornett, and he already has been ruled out, right? We know that he's out since 2 days ago when the Knicks played, and there was that Cantor chalk night that just went pretty bad. He got a game, did not play, basically. He was sitting on the bench. So they're playing Brooklyn, who you get tons of offensive rebounds against. You get just incredible situation for any center to go for 15-plus rebounds, double-double. I really like Vonleh. I hope he plays. I hope there's no confusion around this, which there's going to be. So keep that in mind for sure. Rest of the guys down here are just some guys that I saw. Kawhi Leonard's definitely somebody to keep in mind. He's just getting this extended rest, but I'd imagine he's playing today. It's been basically a week plus. So if he does play, it's going to impact the usage rate of Lowry and Ibaka, who see the biggest spikes when Leonard's off the floor, and also just some other guys who get more usage in Siakam, Powell, obviously starting when he's out there. So that's just injuries. Big ones are highlighted. There's a lot to go around on a 10-game slate, 20 teams. The majority of the league is playing tonight. So, yeah, I might have missed something in here. Hopefully nothing major. I've been checking Fantasy Labs, which is the best news. I'll check right now just in case something's going up. So, yeah, nothing major. Obviously, I'm doing this at like 10 o'clock today, 10:30, 11. So there's going to be news that changes all day long. We don't have tip for another like 7 or 8 hours. Things are definitely going to change. So whenever you're watching this, just be cautious. Check Fantasy Labs, NBA Twitter. Even if you don't have a Twitter, you should create one just for the fact of you're playing NBA DFS. You have to have NBA Fantasy Labs. We'll hop over to Vegas, where most of the lines are out. There's just 2 games that aren't out. I didn't project them just due to the stuff that was going on last night here in State College and just how that transpired into this morning. This was just not my biggest priority. I can say that pretty confidently when I was just making sure that my friends and everybody else were safe. So The ones that here are zeros, you can just project their points. You can check the spreads later in the day. And you can kind of also just figure out what's going to be going on in that game. You have Houston and Toronto. We'll get into their pace. It's going to be a slower pace, but both offenses have a lot of skilled players on them. And then you have Memphis and Sacramento, which might be a total fade game, potentially. A little decent pace, but again, not a ton of great players on these teams, or at least sexy options. I know that you have Fox, things like that. But let's just look into over under, and again, this is just my process. Look at injuries, then look at the matchups, and look at pace, and look at target offense. And by matchups, I mean Vegas, which we're on right now. So tons of games today. There's 20 teams here because there's 10 games. So 20 teams here, and you're just going to see things like this. So things to identify. I'll point out, in Awesemo.com, their streams that they do on YouTube are great. I think I'm cutting my head off a little bit. Oh well. But Awesemo.com, they talk about spreads and what to expect in spreads. And last night, once Julius Randle got ruled out, a lot of people were worrying hop off of Russell Westbrook. I got a little less Westbrook in some of my lineups because there's blowout potential. And that's something that you shouldn't be taking into account. Some people in the Facebook group were reaching out to me. Should I start this guy because I think he'll get more run in the blowout? One, you can't predict blowouts. Like, you don't know when a blowout's going to happen. Last night, that game was pretty close. A bunch of third stringers for the Pelicans almost knocked off the Thunder's starting team, right? It was pretty close at the end of it. I think it ended up being like a 5-point difference is what the score ended as. What does that mean? Russell Westbrook went for almost 80 points. He had a triple-double at the beginning of the third quarter. So even if he got pulled at the end of the third quarter, the man still got you 60 points because he had a triple-double early in the third quarter. Don't predict blowouts, especially if you're predicting blowouts to try and play less used players. One, those players are already pretty terrible, right? They're pretty bad if they're not getting any game time other than a blowout. Two, the blowout has to happen in the third quarter for those guys to see the 10 minutes in the fourth quarter. Otherwise, what's the point of even playing them if they're only going to get an extra 2 or 3 minutes? They're not going to do anything with that usage. And three, you have to hope the blowout happens. So you have to hope that you pick the right player. You have to hope that they see that extended amount of time, and you have to hope that the game actually blows out, which, yes, these spreads sometimes indicate it, especially when you see something like minus 15. It's going to be something that a lot of people stay away from, but it also doesn't always happen. Minus 15, yes, again, that's something where you're going to see probably more times than not a team win by double digits. Just because Vegas is that accurate, but you just can't predict it. You can't rely wholly on or shifting your lineup so much, especially when it's extreme, like taking Russell Westbrook out when he had a great matchup last night going up against the 28th ranked out of 30 teams against the point guard position in the Pelicans, and they were just bodies everywhere down on that team for him to feast on. So the line is something to keep in mind, especially just in terms of if it's closer, that's obviously a good thing because you want to look at the line and see if it's closer. These lines that are 2 points right here, there's a good chance they can go to overtime. But really, the 9-point one can go to overtime. Any given night, it could happen. Just more times than not, the ones that are closer will end up going to overtime. Over-unders are the biggest things to look at to Vegas. Some of the biggest ones that we see here that are out, the 228 is between the Bucks and the Hornets, so that's definitely a game that I have in the target offense that we'll get to. 221 is also a pretty big spread. So basically anything over 220 here, and depending on the slate, I might dip down into these 218 ranges. But we see 223 here, Knicks and Nets. 221.5 is the Clippers and the Bulls. And then we get 224. So we have 5 games over 220. That's a pretty good amount of teams to target. That's 10 teams to choose from. You kind of cut the slate in half there. Keep in mind, though, that we don't have these 2 spreads still out. This one is Toronto and Houston. That's probably a game I'm still going to target. So I'm probably going to target, and I don't know what I actually did once we get there, 5 to 6 games out of these 10. Maybe break it down to 4 or 5 as the day goes on, and ultimately settle on around 4 games to target, maybe some value plays from some other games. But just to start getting in the mindset, right? It's early in the day. What do you want to do? That's where you should be looking, is at these totals. So that's the totals right now. You guys can screenshot this, do whatever you want. Next, we're going to look at pace. So pace, the amount of possessions per game. If this is your first time watching, that's what it means. It's just the amount of possessions per game, and that's what this column says right here. So you got a team like Memphis. You want to target teams over that 100 possessions per game or more, just because more possessions equals more points, more actual baskets scored, field goal attempts, blocks, assists, everything, rebounds. You want to target usually teams over 100, but the NBA average this year is 99.5 as of right now. So the NBA average is basically 100, which has really never been a thing. The game is played so much faster this year, but the higher the better for sure. So you can see here we have some of the higher paced games right up in here. And then the projected pace is basically just adding up the two teams that are playing each other's pace and dividing it by 2. So we get the projected pace of these games. So right here is where we have our highest paced teams. Unfortunately, this isn't filtered, and I have to get it to filter nicely so it all stays together. Maybe put it into a separate spreadsheet, but then we have the highest paced games. So highest paced teams, and then the highest paced games, that just takes into account who that team is playing. So the highest paced game on the slate right now is just this Charlotte and this Bucks game. The Bucks are a team that plays extremely fast. We know that Giannis is out there. So that's definitely a game that we saw the total being the highest. So it makes sense that they have the highest pace, right? That's something that you usually see, these higher paced games, higher totals, because again, higher paces equal more possessions, equal more points. So that's a game I'm definitely keying out on. These 102 games right here, Minnesota and Utah, that's also in the 220, so that's something that kind of meets that criteria of looking for totals around 220, looking for the higher pace teams on the slate, and then attacking their weak points on the defensive side, and that's where we'll get into in the next slide. So you can see here, Clippers, Bulls, again, a higher pace over 102. It's the third highest pace so far that we've seen on the night. And they also have the second highest total, third highest total on the night. So that's something to look at. You see here, Denver and Phoenix, a pretty slower pace, but it's over that 100 that you kind of shoot for. But they have a high total, so they're going to play a little slower. That means usually that they're just 3-point shooting teams. They just like to get deeper into the shot clock with their better field goal percentage shooting teams. Phoenix is a team that is a slow-paced team. Denver's the one that's going to kind of pace up this matchup a decent amount. Nothing incredible, though. Or actually, that should be the other way around. Yeah, so Phoenix is the team that has that pace-up spot in them. They have the Booker. They have all the young guys out there. Oubre now out there actually increasing their pace for them. Josh Jackson. You can see they're 102, so they actually have a decent pace. And Denver's the team that's going to kind of slow them down. They run through their offense a little bit slower, but now that's kind of with an asterisk on it. They haven't had Will Barton all year. He's back, so things could change, but not that dramatically. So this is pace. Again, you can see some of the higher totals on this slate right here, and you can see the fastest paces. The things that correlate between those is the ones you want to target. The higher totals with the higher paces. Pretty good situations to target. And now we get to my target offenses. So I put all the offenses in here. It took a while, 20 teams. I might just end up start doing the target ones, but I like to look at this in case late injury news breaks and I can look at a team and see how they're doing against a certain position. So this is the 20 teams on the slate. I highlighted in yellow the games that I want to target. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I targeted 4 games as of right now that I want to look at. I did not target this Houston and Toronto game. I probably will end up doing it just because there's so many good players in both of those games. There's ways that you can, obviously James Harden's in those games, and there's ways that you can find some value plays on both teams. Especially if Kawhi doesn't go, then it's definitely a target game. And I do like Kawhi even if he does, and I do like Kawhi if he does go. But since the total's out, I really haven't looked into it too much, but I'll be monitoring it. So yeah, I highlighted the games, and this is something you should do is break down your process. I highlighted some of these games, the higher total, higher pace games, and then you kind of look at, I highlighted in red here, where they're bad against certain positions. You can see dead last right now, the Hornets are at the shooting guard position. So what did I do? One of the players of interest, at least early on, is Eric Bledsoe. He's a shooting guard for Milwaukee, and he's going up against the worst, or he has the best possible matchup at his position tonight in terms of defense versus position. And then I just went through and I did some of those things. So you can see here, the Hornets are 26th against the center. I didn't actually go in and do anything with their center position, at least yet. But you could do, it doesn't even have to target. You can just look at overall teams. So you can go down to each column and say, okay, who's in the bottom 10, who's in 20 or worse. That's what I highlighted, 20 or worse, pretty much. So you can see here, 30th. So the Knicks are 30th against the power forward position. What I do then is I go and I look up power forward. Did anybody make it in there for me from that team, from the Nets? No, they probably just didn't have a good player there, or there's some question marks, things of that nature. So definitely a good thing to do is get this breakdown going. So these are the situations that I'm targeting, at least as of right now, early with 8 hours until tip-off. And I'm going to monitor those. So definitely some good things to do in here. You can see here the Cavs are 30th against the point guard position. So who is the point guard for Miami? Lately, it's been a lot of Justice Winslow. You can see I have Justice Winslow in there as an early interest target. So I'll stay on this players of interest page. So how I make my players of interest page, at least early on, is 2 things. So first, injuries. I factor in injuries a ton because injuries are going to open up value. Injuries are going to lead to different plays that usually wouldn't be played if the person who was injured ends up playing, right? It turns situations into ways that you can profit off of, right? So some things that are injury related are like Dinwiddie potentially being out for the first time. How are the Nets going to capitalize on that? Getting on that early is a good thing. Will Harris, will Russell, will somebody else get 40 points on DraftKings tonight? Capitalizing on that before the crowd and the public figure it out is a big way to start making money. Jabari Parker, what will be his usage? A Vonleh or a Cantor, who's going to start? Whoever starts is a guy that I'm definitely getting in my lineup. You can see on my players of interest, I literally put Knicks starting center, whichever one starts, right? If it's Cantor, if it's Vonleh, whichever one is starting in that game, I want to play. Vonleh's cheap at 5,900. I kind of hope it's him. He has a great matchup against the Nets. So I start with the injuries, and then I go through and I look at the pace and all those things, and then obviously that's how I figure out which offenses I want to target. Pace, Vegas, at least early on. And then I break down by position here, and I kind of figure out the rest of my early interests. So we take into account injuries, we take into account defensive matchups, and just to get us filtered down in these defensive matchups, we're taking into account pace in Vegas. So I can go through some of my early interests. Lou Williams just has a great matchup, and I think Lou Williams, I want to get on him before the public does. If we slide back over to DraftKings, we can go to Lou Williams here. $6,700. I think he's going to be fairly cheap or fairly low owned tonight, and I think he's actually is fairly cheap at his price point. Yes, his price point has come up, but his minutes are going to be coming up, right? He's not so much on that minutes restriction anymore. Last game out, he was a little bit more tedious. They've been with him his last 2 games out there. 6,700, I think, is pretty, maybe not cheap, maybe it's perfect pricing for a guy like Lou Williams, who 35 points is what you need out of him tonight. Great matchup. I think he can get there at least early on. Joe Harris, we mentioned Spencer Dinwiddie out there. I think Harris is a guy who will see that bump up, and also he's playing the 29th ranked, the second worst ranked Knicks defense against the shooting guard position. I don't really love shooting guards, especially the ones that don't get active in the rebound and the assist column, like a guy like Harris, who you need a lot of points out of. I target point guards, I target centers. Point guards are going to get you more assists. Centers are going to get you easier converting shots. So will point guards when they drive, because centers are shooting again from 2 feet away, and they'll also be getting more rebounds. So lots just more point potential there than a shooting guard. Like a guy like Klay Thompson, who in fantasy is usually only good when he has his blow-up game once every month and a half or whatever it is, like he did a few nights ago, right? He needs to for him to get 50 fantasy points as a shooting guard, he needs to get probably 40 to 45 just alone in the air, right? Just alone shooting. So a guy like Joe Harris is interesting at his price point. Wiggins, again, if a guy like Teague, if a guy like Rose is out, Wiggins is going to see a huge usage bumpage at $5,700. I think it could end up being a Wiggins chalk night. The guy's minutes, again, haven't really talked too much about minutes, but minutes are by far the most predictive thing of fantasy success besides actual scoring. So scoring field goals, you get 2 points. That correlates directly with fantasy points, right? You get 2 points. But minutes, the more you're on the floor, is the more points you're going to get. That correlates the most besides actual scoring. So this guy's minutes are just insane, right? You can count on Wiggins to probably get you 36 minutes if the game doesn't blow out. This team's playing a back-to-back, I believe 3 out of 4, maybe not. So keep in mind that Haym or Towns could see rest, limited minutes. But if their point guards are out, he's going to have to take over a little bit, potentially ball handling duties, maybe here and there. He's just going to be on the floor for a ton of minutes. He just scored 41 last night. That might inflate his ownership a little bit. But at $5,700, the man needs to get you 30 to 32 points for you to feel happy about him. And if he's playing close to 36 minutes, I'm fine with him. I think he can get you a point per minute in this matchup tonight. Bayless is the same on Minnesota. He's come in and he's gone for 30 points back-to-back nights, and he's still only 3,600. I hate the idea of playing him because, he's just old. He's washed up. He's not that great. But if he's going to get you 30 points when he's out there and he's going to be playing 30 minutes, he's definitely somebody to keep in mind at 3,600. He's going to end up being chalk if Rose is ruled out, if Teague is ruled out. But at 3,600, we've seen the chalk hitting these last few nights, and it's because all you need out of them is like a 25-point game. And if they're 10xing value for you at your price, if he goes for 35 again, 36, and he 10x's his price range of 3,600, that's absolutely insane. It lets you get up at a lot of other spots. It probably lets you get a guy like Harden in your lineup, who we could see, we talked about Bledsoe. Harden, 13,800, right? 13.8. Just absolutely insane pricing on this guy, but it's well-deserved. Harden always has to be in your player pool when Chris Paul's out. Chris Paul probably not going to be playing. So it's interesting to see that this might be Harden's last night where he can kind of blow up in fantasy and be this expensive, right? Chris Paul targeting to come back Sunday, they're saying. Winslow, we talked about the point guard position. Jamal Murray also has a good matchup with the point guard position. I think he might be a little bit too highly priced based on some of the other guys I like on his team that we'll get to. But I think he's definitely worth putting in at least my early player pool. Ricky Rubio, as well at $5,700. Look, if Rose and Teague are out, he's going to go up against a guy like Bayless, who isn't the worst defender in the world, but he's definitely not the greatest, not even close. So Rubio should have his fair share of success against him, and he's, I think, very mispriced here. You also get the benefit of that game being the last tip-off if you did play any of these Minnesota-Utah guys, which I think a lot of people are. So you can kind of just see yourself placing higher than other people all throughout the night. I'll quickly go over forward and center, so this stays under 30 minutes. But Nance, we talked about him. I like him. Aside from Bobby Portis, I also like the matchup for Lauri Markkanen. I like that matchup a lot. Favors at $5,000 is just too cheap out there. We can quickly look at Favors. A good matchup against Minnesota at the power forward position. If we want to look back quickly, I know I'm going back and forth here, but if we want to look at the Bucks against or Minnesota against power forward position, they rank 24th, so he has a pretty good matchup, right? The 7th worst defense against that position, and he's only $5,000 for a guy who got ejected in the first quarter, so anybody who sees the game log is going to see this, and they're not going to see the success that he's pretty much had for the last month of the season, and he's pretty cheap. So Favors is a good, interesting option at $5,000. Will Barton at $6,100 I think is just dirt cheap. This is a guy who can go for 40 points almost every single night when he's healthy. He did that in his last game. It seems like he's healthy now. Oubre, I love Oubre in pace-up spots. Oubre and Jackson, both of them right here, right? They're on the same team. They're going to get more usage right now, right? Because we saw, if we go to Phoenix, we know that TJ Warren's out, and he's out for 2 weeks. Oubre came in last night. The thing that I don't like about Devin Booker, and I'll say this, he had 16 points in the first quarter yesterday. He had actual scoring points. He ends up with 30-something fantasy points because he can't do anything else. Oubre's a guy who can do other things. He can rebound, he can assist. I think he's just a far better value play at $5,600 than a guy like Booker. At $5,600, he's in a great spot. If we also want to go to Josh Jackson, who $5,500, I still think he's in a good spot. He has a good matchup in Denver tonight against Barton. So I like Josh Jackson because, one thing, his ownership was inflated because he did this. Now it's going to be deflated because he did this. I kind of like jumping back on that as it deflates if I think it gives me value. JaMychal Green, $5,200, just another guy who's interesting to me. Center position, if we still see this Suns position where Bender's going to get the start at the 5 and get these easy small shots, easy rebounds, $4,600 is pretty much chalk for this guy, right? I think that he's hit on value 3 nights in a row, 2 games of 30, last night over 27 points. I think at $4,600, he's a good play. We touched on the Knicks, love Vonleh if he plays, love Cantor, whoever starts there. Towns at $10,000. If Teague is out, if Rose is out, his usage goes through the roof at $10,000. He's a guy worth paying up for. Bobby Portis at $5,700. Yes, Parker's coming back. Shouldn't cut into Portis, who's continuing to see more minutes as he's out there. Has a very good matchup if we go to the Bulls here. Chicago playing the Clippers. Bobby Portis is playing the second worst team against the position. Even if he gets to start somehow at the power forward, still 27th. I think Bobby Portis is in a really good spot at $5,700. Jokic at $10,600 has a good matchup, and I just think Jokic's that one of those guys who I always like to have in my player pools because he's one of those guys who's always going to go for, or potentially go once a week for 60-plus points. That would get you there at this price point. So, I mean, right now, players mentioned at the expensive high level. For me, it's Towns, it's Jokic, it's going to be Harden, of course, just because he's James Harden. I think that the pace-up spot and the total for Giannis is a very good situation. I think a lot of people aren't going to go to Giannis. A lot of people are still going to pay up for maybe 40% of the field, if not more, for James Harden. But Giannis is a guy who's going to continue to just get you there. He just doesn't have as much as a ceiling as Harden. Nobody on this slate does. Other than that, paying up for guys, Leonard, if he goes, I'm going to pay up for him. People haven't seen Kawhi Leonard play in a week and a half, and they're going to forget that at $9,500, needing to get you 50 points, something that this man basically does half the time he goes out there. I like Kawhi Leonard a ton if he plays. So, yeah, that's it, guys. This is the Friday video. I'm going to try and get it out there as soon as possible. If you are still watching to this point and you made it almost halfway through, let me know in the comments down below that you watched or you made it all the way through. Let me know in the comments down below that you made it all the way through. I appreciate you so much. If you're not subscribed yet, I just want to ask you one more time, please subscribe to my channel. I hope this video gave you value. My name's Sal. Best of luck tonight, everybody. Peace.